I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is a case involving a 32-year-old man who was saved from a fire. He weighed only 68 pounds, and now prosecutors say he was held captive by his stepmother. Here's the story. In the quiet suburbs of Waterbury, Connecticut, a horrifying secret smoldered for decades before bursting into flames. Kimberly Sullivan, a 56-year-old stepmother, now stands accused of unimaginable cruelty, imprisoning her stepson in a locked room for nearly 20 years. Investigators say the man, now 32, lived in filth and isolation, denied warmth, light, and freedom. His world was reduced to bottles for waste, newspaper for bedding, and memories of a life stolen. But one desperate night in February of 2025, he set his prison ablaze, a desperate act of survival. Firefighters found him skeletal, trembling, barely clinging to life, whispering, "I wanted my freedom." Authorities allege Sullivan orchestrated his captivity with chilling precision, keeping her secret hidden behind suburban walls. She now faces charges of kidnapping, assault, and cruelty. The fire that nearly killed him instead exposed years of torment and a truth too horrific to contain. This story's more than a head scratcher. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it happened. Like, this is real. And it's hard to think that it's real because in many cases where we're talking about people kept in captivity, locked in boxes, unfortunately, it's always these young children. Well, the allegations here are he was a child at one point, but now, I mean, at the time of this fire, when everything was uncovered, he's 32 years old. Let's get some more information. Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas is with us here. Let's start with the fire, Cody. What's the story behind this fire?
Well, of course, Vinny, this is all taking place in Waterbury, Connecticut, in a normal two-story, regular old suburban home. But the short answer to that question, Vinny, is that, of course, he was making a desperate attempt to try to get emergency personnel to come save him from his situation. Why? Because, well, his living conditions, as described by him, were horrendous. You see some of those pictures on the screen now, how this is obviously after the fire, but you see how junky and cluttered. That was his bedroom here. You see how things are scattered all over the place, where, just less than ideal living situations, to say the least. Now, Vinny, what you're seeing right there, that's a lock on a door frame. And we have photos of these locks as taken by emergency personnel when they were there. These locks are important because he says that he was trapped inside of his bedroom with locks that were on the outside of the door that would not allow for him to come out of the door even if he wanted to. So pretty much he was, trapped in there like an animal in a cage. Now, these locks are important, and they're mentioned in the arrest affidavit for Kimberly Sullivan with quotes from him, the stepson, and the firefighters in the observations. But we'll begin with the stepson. It says in part that he stated that he always had a lock on the outside of his door. It evolved from a chain lock to a padlock and eventually to a slide bolt lock. And then it talks about the firefighters' observations once they got in there. It says they observed that there is a slide lock on the outside of the door frame which could be used to secure a door closed from the outside of the room. Furthermore, the removed door from the room has a latch that appears to match up with the location of the slide lock. So, of course, we isolated photos of the slide lock, and important to note, we still aren't entirely sure if this is the lock specifically to his bedroom, but again, the affidavit mentions a slide lock. This is the pictures that they took of a slide lock. Again, he says he was locked in there with locks on the outside of his door as if he was an animal in the zoo. But on that note, Vinny, that arrest affidavit also has the victim describing himself living in captivity. That affidavit says, quote, in part, upon reviewing the male victim, Officer Inzatari observed that he was extremely emaciated. His hair was matted and unkempt. He was very dirty, and his teeth all appeared to be rotten. He stated that he had been locked in that house his entire life, adding that Kimberly Sullivan keeps him locked inside his bedroom. So, Vinnie, another important thing that's mentioned in another court document, the search and seizure warrant. No, initially, the victim talked about how this was pretty much an attempt to get emergency personnel there to save him from the situation. But as the investigation went on, according to this search and seizure warrant, he was trying to kill himself. It says in part, he intentionally started the fire in his room on the second floor using a lighter, hand sanitizer, and paper in an effort to kill himself. It was on to say, quote, it was reported that he wanted to kill himself because he, quote, wanted freedom, as he has been held captive at the residence since he was approximately 11 years old. So, Vinnie, a culmination of all of this, all of these situations as described by him as these horrendous, horrific living situations, that all leads us to him setting the fire that night. Let's take a look at the body cam once emergency personnel arrived.
Come on, come down.
Come on down.
Who else is in the house? Who else is in here?
My stepson is in here.
How many other people?
Listen, that's it. I have 2 cats.
Everybody's out?
Yes.
But your stepson's still inside?
Yeah, he's right here.
Okay,
yes,
come out. Come down the road. Come on, come on. It's not safe to stay here. Come on.
All right, here he is. All right, my dog is shaking.
I know. Come down here. That's 287-433 victim. Fire victim.
Okay.
Come on.
My
80
dog
seconds
is,
right here. Come on.
my dog.
I know. Come on.
I'm coming.
You're seeing that one victim right here. You just stay over here.
So, Vinnie, I don't know what your takeaway from that video was, but my takeaway was that she's holding her dogs, concerned about her dogs, shaking in her arms. She's talking about these 2 cats, but she doesn't really mention her 68-pound grown man, 32-year-old stepson in the burning house, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, same exact reaction, Cody. All right, Cody's going to stick around. Okay, that video brings us to the first question in our investigation. It's exactly what Cody was talking about. And it's our question. Why didn't Kimberly Sullivan get her stepson out of the house? Why didn't she, she's out of the house, the dog's out of the house, she's talking about the cats. Oh yeah, my stepson's in there also. Why didn't she do something to get him out of there? Here to help answer that question, Chief Public Defender, Oakland County, Michigan, Paulette Lofton, and nationally known psychotherapist and author, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. All right, Dr. Robbie, I'm gonna start with you on this. I mean, Cody's reaction was my exact reaction. She's very concerned about the dog, very concerned about the cats, and oh yeah, it's almost like it's a footnote that my 68-pound, 32-year-old stepson is inside the house that's on fire. What's going on here?
I had the same idea. It really seemed like this stepmother valued her dogs way more than her stepson, and that she treated him as if he were a nothing, trash, not worthy of any emotion or human dignity. And it's very clear from this clip just the lack of connection or kindness or concern she had towards her stepson. So this was just somebody that she abused, perhaps because of her need to control and be sadistic, and there are probably multiple reasons for this. But this is not a woman who really considered her stepson a person of value or even worthy of humanity.
Paulette, this becomes a real problem for her if this is our reaction. If the jury sees this and sees, oh, okay, there's a fire in the house. He's 32, he's 68 pounds, and there's very little concern for his well-being. And by the way, the fire was focused in his room, which is the other part of this, because he set the fire. I don't know if she knew at the time that he had set the fire, but what are your thoughts about her reaction in that moment?
So obviously everyone deals with traumatic events differently, and I think that's understandable. But here it's very clear she had left the house, she was on the sidewalk, and she had her prized possession, her dog. And the first thing that she told the firefighter was not that her son was in there. We didn't get that detail until he asked who else is in the house or is everyone else out of the house. So I think a jury, if this does go to a jury trial, is going to have some difficulty with that, because we've all seen stories where parents nearly die or are burned horrifically trying to get their loved ones out of this house. So I think the jury's going to struggle with that initial contact that they had with her on that body cam.
Paulette, that's such a great way of analyzing that situation. Dr. Robbie, it's not even that she's not saving him. She's not like, oh my goodness, my stepson, please get my stepson out of there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, we see the disconnect, and when you hear more of the story unfold, you see the absolute control and sadism, and you wonder, how could somebody behave like this? How could somebody be so cruel to a stepson? And it sounded like this behavior was going on while her husband was alive and then got progressively worse. And you know, we need to look at, does this person have an antisocial personality disorder where they absolutely don't have any empathy or any sense of morality? Or is this a repetition of the way she had been treated, and so she had some need to control this poor man and treat him badly? We don't really know, but what we know is it's very clear that there was abuse happening and that it was undeserved.
Okay, our guests are staying with us. Coming up next, why was the stepson still in this house at age 32?
And he could have been taken out of that in 2004 if DCF did their job.
My two best friends were just murdered.
Join me for a Court TV true crime series where we take you from the crime scene to the courtroom.
Donna Adelson hates every piece of grass that Dan Marcel ever walked on.
It's something that'll haunt all of us forever.
It always seemed like he was covering or deceiving.
This was a whole different level.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. New episodes Saturday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific.
Only on Court TV.
I thought the safest place he would be was with a parent, with his father. And that didn't happen.
And if you are struggling, right, and then you know that he may be able to take care of your son, that was the right choice to make. That's the choice. That's the selfless choice that a mother makes who wants the best for their child.
So. You would think so. He was kept with monsters.
That's the biological mother of the stepson, the victim in this case. Heartbreaking, right? For everybody. I mean, the conditions, 32 years old, 68 pounds. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Okay, let's go through the history here of what was going on inside of this house, Cody.
Well, Vinny, this victim told police that there is a long history of abuse dating back to when he was just 3 years old, and all of that is pretty much outlined in this arrest affidavit. And it begins, saying in part, quote, the male victim stated that his earliest memories start around the age of 3. He recalled being hungry, which led him to sneak out of his room at night to get food and fluids to drink. He stated that when the wrappings to the food he ate were eventually discovered, he began to be locked in his room. He stated that at that time, it was only during the evening hours. He recalled drinking water from the toilet at the time. When he was in the 4th grade, he was permanently pulled out of school due to the fact the school he was attending contacted the Department of Children and Families, or DCF for short, based on what he was doing in school. The male victim stated that by this time in his life, he was always hungry. So when he was at school, he would ask others for their food, steal others' food, and sometimes eat food out of the garbage. This resulted in DCF responding to the home on 2 occasions. When they were there, he was told by Sullivan to tell them that everything was fine. After the second DCF visit, he was pulled from school by Sullivan. The male victim stated that he was provided worksheets for a short period of time, but the skill level never advanced and no one was teaching him anything. And then it goes on, Vinnie, in that arrest affidavit to about, adolescent age or late middle school, early high school. It says in part, after that, he was let out of his room for a limited time in the morning around 8 a.m. On occasion, he was let out in the early evening hours briefly. There were times when he would be locked in his room for a whole day at a time, equating to 24 straight hours. The last time he left the property was when he was approximately 14 or 15 years old. When discussing his father dying, he stated that his captivity and restraint got even worse. Essentially, the male victim was locked in his room between 22 to 24 hours a day. When asked if he was hungry every day, he stated, all day, every day, my entire life. He was forced to use bottles and newspaper to dispose of his waste. After he urinated into a bottle, he would have to then funnel it into a tube he created with a series of straws and then guide those straws through a hole in the window to empty it. He had not bathed in a year or two. So, Vinnie, if these allegations are true, I mean, this is just a real rough life that this stepson, this victim, was going through.
Oh, this is brutal stuff. Absolutely brutal, starting when he's 11. All right, let's get back to his biological mother who was on this show. What else did she tell us?
Well, she, joined us on the program and she talked about how difficult it was to try to reconnect with him, in the midst of all this going on because she had some personal issues going on in her life. Take a listen to what she had to say.
So what happened? Give us a little bit of the backstory of how you became separated and any efforts that you made to try to reconnect with your son.
I had some issues I was dealing with personally that have nothing to do with the Sullivans. His father shut me out, and then after a while, he actually shut everybody out.
And Vinnie, another question in the midst of all of this is, where was DCF when this child was pulled out of school at 4th grade? That's 9, 10 years old. Where were they? His mother, his biological mother, had something to say about that on the program as well. Take a listen.
When DCF was called in 2004 several times, they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. And just because you have a clean house does not mean you have a healthy house. And he could have been taken out of that in 2004 if DCF did their job.
So, Vinnie, as we can see there, her clear emotion, she felt strongly that DCF could have done more to protect this child.
And what is DCF saying about all this?
Well, they came back, according to some NBC reporting, they had their own statement, talking about their protocols and that they pretty much did nothing wrong. It says in part, according to NBC News, Connecticut's Child Welfare Agency fired back that it simply did not have, quote, sufficient evidence at the time to remove the male victim. The state's Department of Children and Families says it received 6 reports related to the Waterbury home from 1996 to 2005. It says each report was investigated. During that time, the agency made unannounced, announced, and after-hours visits to the home, which is roughly 30 miles southwest of Hartford, assessing home conditions and food availability. DCF investigators interviewed the home's children alone and away from their parents. The kids did not disclose neglect or abuse. Investigators were also in contact with the man's pediatrician at the time, who noted no concerns. And Vinnie, one more question that people may have, regarding the victim is why he didn't come forward about any of this. I mean, he was saved when he was 32, so he was there for 2 decades. Why didn't he try to say anything to anyone at any point in time? Well, according to the arrest affidavit, it lays that out as well. It says, quote, when the detectives asked the male victim why he never spoke with anyone about his experience, he stated that he wanted to, but there was the constant threat of longer lockdowns and further diminishment of food. The male victim describes a life of being mentally conditioned by Sullivan. He stated that the threat was that he would, quote, not see the light of day if he told anyone. he was their secret, stating, "I have been kept a secret my entire life." Regarding other potential visitors to the house, the male victim stated that there was hardly anyone who came to the house, and if someone did come, he was told not to make a sound. The male victim stated that, quote, "under pain of death, no one was to see me." So according to him, Vinny, he was pretty much indoctrinated by the defendant here, Kimberly Sullivan.
Unbelievable. All right, Cody's got more for us in a little bit. That brings us to the next question in our investigation. Why was the stepson still in this house at age 32? That's what sets this case apart. I mean, it's over the course of decades. He's now a grown man, but he's only 68 pounds. Here to help with our investigation, Chief Public Defender, Oakland County, Michigan, Paulette Lofton, and nationally known psychotherapist and author, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Paulette, what are your thoughts about him remaining in that house for 2 decades? And as a full adult, you know, in age at least, obviously not in, he's emaciated at 68 pounds, but he is a 32-year-old man.
That is going to be something that the jury is going to struggle with because, like you said, that is such a long period of time. The last time his life was normal was in 4th grade, and he's now 32 years old. And I think Ms. Sullivan is going to have a difficult time with the jury with that fact as well, because if she is going to claim that this was obviously her husband's son, and this was something that he did and he chose to do, and she unfortunately was just there and dealing with whatever he did to his son, but he died. So that would have been the appropriate time to come clean and say, listen, this is what my son was doing, or my husband was doing to my stepson. And I think she could have maybe been in a position where she wasn't going to be charged with something. But now here, if he had not set a fire, I think a jury would be able to reasonably assume that he would still be living captive in that home. So obviously in the condition that he was in, I don't think he was able to just walk out the door and ask for help. But I think the jury's going to struggle with the fact that the length of time this went on and the fact that definitely after her husband's death, she was an active participant in this abuse.
Dr. Robbie, what are your thoughts about how he remained there until age 32?
Well, you have to remember, I mean, this man did not have a normal childhood. And what he basically was taught was learned helplessness. So he might have felt no matter what he did, he couldn't escape this woman, that he had been brainwashed by her and feared her, maybe feared something worse would happen to him. And maybe because of all of the locks, he couldn't figure out how to get himself out. So, I think it is possible if you look at all of the circumstances to see why he was in such a difficult position for himself. And he wasn't trying to get out. He was trying to kill himself to free himself of the abuse. And the stepmother might have made sure that her stepson didn't get out, because if he got out, he would report the abuse and she would be in trouble. So she was invested in keeping him silent and keeping him a hostage of her abuse.
We have about 20 seconds here, Paulette. How does the suicide aspect of this play in front of a jury?
Sympathy. Because he had gotten to a point where he would rather be dead than continue to live in this manner. So I think a jury is really going to take that to heart when deciding a verdict.
Big thanks, Paulette Lofton and Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Great to see you both. Still to come,
Thank you.
Does Kimberly Sullivan's story make sense? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the case of a 32-year-old man who weighed only 68 pounds. Prosecutors say he was the victim of over 2 decades of abuse. Here's the story. In a Connecticut courtroom, Kimberly Sullivan sits stoic, her once suburban life now reduced to whispers of horror and betrayal. Prosecutors call her a monster. A woman who locked her stepson away for nearly 2 decades, starving him of freedom, warmth, and human contact. But her defense paints a different picture. A desperate caregiver overwhelmed by a troubled young man she claimed was violent and unpredictable. They say she feared for her safety, that her actions were misguided attempts to control, not cruelty. Her lawyers describe a home consumed by chaos, shattered doors, police visits, medical neglect, until the night flames exposed it all. The stepson, weighing barely 70 pounds, told investigators he started the fire to escape. What was really happening behind these closed doors? Soon a jury will have to decide. Was she a captor or a woman wrongfully accused? Now, there are two sides to every story. We've laid out what we believe prosecutors are going to present inside of a courtroom. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Let's get the other side of the story. I mean, that's what we do here. What is Kimberly Sullivan's side of what happened here?
Well, Vinnie, Kimberly Sullivan's attorney previously came here on the program and laid everything out about his client's side of the story, pretty much saying that the victim's biological father was a bad guy, that the victim had free range to roam around the house, that there was definitely food in the house, and he also said that the victim has credibility issues with his story. Take a listen to what he had to say on the program.
The father is the one that dictated how his son would be raised. This was not my client's biological son. She did not make the determination as to schooling, being pulled out of school. A lot has been put on her, and that is simply not the case. He's 32 years old. She could not control whether he took care of himself properly or not. He was 32 years old. What I can tell you is she denies ever restraining him. She denies ever locking him in a room. She denies ever depriving him of any of these opportunities. My understanding is there was always food in the house. There was no restrictions on the ability to get food in the house. And I know you asked about earlier, but what I can tell you, when the police went in that home, there was food in the cupboards, there was food in the refrigerator. My understanding is he had access to this. I don't want to come on here and bash this individual. But what I can tell you, based on the discovery I have seen, the interviews I have watched, there will be significant credibility issues. This case ultimately is going to come down to credibility. There is no independent smoking gun. There's no video. There's no admissions. It will be one person's word against another's, potentially. I don't have specifics as to their relationship. Nothing that has been indicated to me indicates that it was a hostile relationship in any way. They both lived in the home. I'm unaware of any significant problems between them while in the home. So what you're showing there is just one of the many pictures that were released by the Waterbury Police Department. These pictures were released without context, in the middle of a pending case, and we believe they're extremely prejudicial. Because it's unclear what locks were where. What I can tell you is a number of the interior doors had exterior locks. Those locks, we believe, were in the home prior to my client ever moving in. They were not installed by my client. And there were locks on almost all the exterior doors in the home. So we disagree with the premise that he was ever locked in that room or that any of those exterior locks were even used. Based on what he has told police, he did not go to the doctor. But any decision about him going to any doctors, those are decisions that the father made. I have spoken to my client. My understanding is she didn't prevent him from showering, didn't prevent him from eating, encouraged both, is actually my understanding. She worked a retail position about 30 minutes away from her home. She worked that position for years. He was home alone quite often, not restrained in any way. The main reason why I came on here tonight is because there has been such a rush to judgment. Almost all the coverage I have seen, respectfully, assumes that this actually occurred. I have yet to hear anyone objectively question any of the allegations. When you look at the pictures, I would ask, look and see look at and ask yourself what's not in those pictures. What evidence of restraint do we have? We have exterior locks on all the outside doors. There's no chains, there's no bars, there's no handcuffs, there's no physical marks showing he's been restrained. There's not even an allegation of physical violence to restrain him. There's been a rush to judgment, and I know the whole world thinks she's guilty, and the whole world thinks that we should lynch her without a trial, and that she shouldn't even have a defense. And I'm here to push back on that. This case is far from done. It is far from over, and we intend to fight this.
Well, Vinnie, you heard his words there, powerful words. Case comes down to credibility, one person's word against the other, a rush to judgment, and based on everything he listed out, by all accounts, it seems like he's very much so ready to take this to trial.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because obviously things have happened to this 32-year-old man, but pointing the finger back to the father who died a short time before all of this happened. All right, thanks, Cody. That brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's about what we just heard. Does Kimberly Sullivan's story make sense here? Here to help answer that question, Los Angeles criminal defense attorney Silva Megardician is with us, and Dr. Yalda Safai, forensic specialist, psychiatrist, and medical health expert. Great to have you both here. All right, Silva, I'll begin with you. What are your thoughts? Does her story make sense that he is not credible, and it was the father who made all these decisions?
Look, Vinnie, I understand the defense counsel's position, and he's advocating for his client. But there are issues, and the defense it's going to be very hard to convince a jury that this woman, who's the parental figure, was essentially a captive in her own home by this violent young man. He's 68 pounds. If she felt in danger, are there reports that she called the police? You know, in California, we have 5150, where if a parent feels that their child is in danger to them or themselves, they can actually call and have that child involuntarily placed in a hospital for help. Did she try to get mental health for her stepson? Did she try to get mental health for herself if she felt tortured by her son? There are so many things that prosecutors can latch onto. I think the problem with the defense here is that there has to be also focus on experts and mental health experts to analyze what was wrong with this relationship, because obviously something at its core was not working. But I don't think her defense is going to hold water with a reasonable jury.
Dr. Yalda Safai, what are your thoughts about the defendant, Kimberly Sullivan's version of what was happening inside that house?
So, Vinnie, at this point, we have to take her word for it, right? Because she's presumed innocent until proven otherwise. But there's a few things here. First of all, how does a full-grown man drop down to 68 pounds? If, in fact, she's claiming that he was doing this to himself, he wasn't keeping him captive, but she sat back and saw him become more and more malnourished, and then she sat back and didn't intervene. Do we have here, at minimum, a case of neglect? Yes, she's saying she didn't keep him captive. She wasn't controlling him, et cetera, et cetera. But I think here we might have a case of pure neglect. And as the previous person said, I think there's a lot of unknowns. Was this person suffering from mental illness? Was she also a victim in itself? I mean, these things will come in light during the trial. But I think if she was not mentally ill and she sat back and let this happen, there are some extra charges such as neglect to be made here.
And Silva, how does his current age, I mean, when the fire happens, he's 32 years old. How does that play into all of this? Because, again, at one point, yes, he was a child, but that's a couple decades ago.
A couple of ways, Vinnie, and we see this a lot with issues where you do have almost like a captive relationship that exists. He was essentially, and again, the prosecution will argue this, was held a captive in a way that stunted his growth. It stunted his mental growth. It also had an intrinsic effect, and we see this in victims. We see this with the victims of domestic abuse, where they feel they have no other choice than to accept their circumstances. And for this young man, it's obvious that when he was a child, his father also wasn't a phenomenal father where he had a regular life. He was pulled out of school so young that he didn't have not only that socialization, but it looks like he didn't understand what normal was. And I think that plays into why maybe at 32 he waited so long to be free. So I think the DA can really latch onto those issues.
All right, our guests are staying with us. Coming up next, should the stepson's new name be released?
You don't know the name of the person accusing you. How are you going to fully investigate?
I'm Vinnie Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan. Weeknights at 8, 7 Central. Only on Court TV.
You dream about moments like this. My goodness.
The fastest female track and field stars compete in a one-night-only event. Atlas NYC 2025, live from New York City, Friday at 7. It's on ION. He's our...
Do you have a message for your son?
I'm sorry he had to go through this. I can't.
So the case is getting closer and closer to trial. It takes time. You know, there's pretrial litigation. There are court hearings. There are motions that are made like any other case. Let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. And there was a recent pretrial hearing in all this. What was it all about?
Yeah, Vinny, this pretrial hearing took place on October 3rd, and it was, you know, a real brief hearing, only minutes long. The defense argued about two specific motions. They wanted her, Kimberly Sullivan, to be able to return to her Waterbury home that she shared with her stepson, to be able to gather her belongings, and for her GPS tracker to be removed. And her defense says that she isn't a flight risk and that these restrictions are, quote, unnecessarily burdensome. Now, the judge allowed for her to go back to her house, but he postponed that decision about the GPS tracker to be removed for another hearing on October 31st of 2025, so on Halloween. Now, Sullivan's stepson, he has this, we knew him publicly after after he was saved. We knew him as S, just the letter. Now he has his new name, and the state filed a motion to keep this new name concealed, but the defense wants that name to be made public. Take a listen to her defense attorney after that hearing on why he wants that name made public.
When someone chooses how they choose to identify themselves to the public, I think is relevant. Your name is part of your identity. And not just that, from an investigation standpoint. If you don't know the name of the person accusing you, how are you going to fully investigate their background, their history, the statements they may be making? So in our objection to the state's motion, we do, I think, a very thorough job of raising the grounds as to why the name is important. She has done nothing wrong. She's done nothing wrong, and the evidence against her is lacking, to say the least. Okay, it's based on one person's allegations, and the more we dig in, the less credible they are. So we're confident that we're going to have a good result.
And Vinny, there's this victim advocates group called Safe Haven, and they have made a statement and weighed in on this name reveal debate. And according to reporting by NBC Connecticut, they say, quote, it's a conversation domestic violence survivor advocacy group Safe Haven of Greater Waterbury, who has worked with S, says is concerning to them. Moving forward, they need that safety, and providing the offender with that information, it puts their life at risk, said Amanda Nardozzi of Safe Haven of Greater Waterbury. It's important for him or any victim moving forward to be able to start their life not in fear. Safe Haven spearheaded a GoFundMe, raising nearly $400,000 for S to go towards living expenses, housing, and medical treatment. So, Vinny, again, there's a hearing coming up on October 31st, 2025. We'll see what the decision surrounding this name comes out of that hearing.
Yeah, important on a couple different levels. Cody Thomas, great reporting tonight as always. Thank you so much. That brings us to the next question in our investigation. Should the stepson's new name be released, and specifically be released to the defense and the defendant? Here to help with our investigation, Los Angeles criminal defense attorney Silva Megardician and psychiatrist, forensic specialist, medical health expert Dr. Yalda Safai. Dr. Safai, what are your thoughts here about the impact that this could have on the stepson? It seems does not want his name revealed, has chosen a new name. How could it impact him potentially if, in fact, it is released to the defendant and to the person he believes was abusing him for years?
Sure. I think for as legally as it's possible, he should keep his name a hidden secret, because this is a victim that had no control over his life for 20 years. Keeping his name concealed is just one way he can regain a sense of control and safety, and he needs this at this point. So should his name be revealed? I don't know what legally is right or not, but I think in order for this man to heal, it is his right, and his name should be protected. In addition, Vinny, we know that victims usually get scrutinized, especially in high-profile cases such as that. They're thrown into a public eye, they get scrutinized, and sometimes the trauma of that is as bad as the trauma of what they initially went through. So I think he just needs to use this time as long as he can to focus on his healing.
Yeah, he is the witness for prosecutors in this case. Not going to be an easy moment there. Silva, what are your thoughts here legally about keeping the name of the accuser here secret from the defendant?
You know, Vinny, there is a distinction, and the distinction is the name should be kept private from the defendant, but not from the defense attorney. And there are ways that the law can actually protect his name from being released to the defendant. We see this a lot in gang cases, where as attorneys, we also don't disclose certain information to our clients, like names. The judge will put a protective order. In a case like this, it's important that the defense counsel has the name of the victim, because it is incredibly important to have access to the medical documents if there is any other history that's necessary. For instance, mental health records, if there are some records that he had sought care, and maybe, just maybe, there's some sort of defense where maybe he voluntarily kept himself in this position, or maybe we just don't know, which is why it's so important for the defense to have access to it. But I do think the defense counsel should also stipulate to keep them separate and just say, look, I will keep the name separate, but I absolutely need the name for defense purposes. I understand it's a very, this is a very emotional time. I do believe my client is innocent, but I do intend on keeping them separate with no contact. It's not a lot to ask. And I think that way the judge will feel also that all parties are protected, especially for trial and for the defense to do their job in the right way.
Yeah, and I think this one's going to trial. Big thank you, Dr. Yalda Safai and Silva Megardician. Appreciate your time and your expertise. This story, incredibly tragic, right? And complicated. We've seen many cases like this involving children as victims, and those stories are much easier to decipher. But here the victim is a 32-year-old. So this one raises many more questions that a jury will have to consider. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for the answers as the investigation continues.